Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. In this video today, I'm going to be talking about the digital euro, the wholesale CBDC, and I'm also going to dig a little bit deep into the wholesale CBDC and what they're telling us about it, and compare the two, the digital euro wholesale and digital euro retail CBDCs. So let's talk about the difference between a retail versus wholesale CBDC. So CBDCs are separated into two categories. So when the central bank or country talks about CBDCs, it's into two categories, and this is something you should be aware of. There's the retail side and the wholesale side. Now, these two categories are also separated in terms of their development times and how difficult it is to develop them and how complex it is to develop them. So the retail CBDCs, these are basically CBDCs that are issued by the central bank for the general public, such as citizens and businesses, to use for making retail payments. They are usually more complex to build out for retail infrastructure compared to wholesale CBDCs. And also for the retail CBDCs, there's more regulations and legislative roadblocks as well compared to having a wholesale CBDC being developed. So this is why retail CBDC takes more time to get out into the market compared to a wholesale CBDC. Now, a wholesale CBDC, these are CBDCs issued by the central bank for banks to use for making large transaction payments between each other, and they are less complex to implement compared to a retail CBDC. So I want to talk about this article called Demystifying Wholesale Central Bank Digital Currency. It's on the ECB website, and it's basically a speech by Fabio Panetta, who is a member of the ECB's executive board, and he gave this speech in September 2022 talking about wholesale CBDCs. He dropped some useful information in this speech that even I was unaware of, and I would like to share that with you. So he said something that I found interesting. He basically said that the wholesale CBDCs have existed for decades and isn't something new made possible by distributed ledger technology. Because usually, automatically, most people assume when talking about CBDCs, it must require DLT to exist. Now, I was one of those people, when I heard CBDCs mentioned, I thought DLT is imperative for there to be a CBDC. But what Fabio Panetta is saying is that the concept of a central bank digital currency or a digital currency between banks have existed for decades, well before DLT technology even came into existence, because they've been sending digital bank money to each other for years, even before DLT. When people assume that CBDCs must require a distributed ledger technology to exist, be built, or it's needed to operate CBDCs between banks, that isn't the case. A DLT system is not necessarily required for CBDCs to operate, and it can be based on any digital technology basically. It doesn't have to be DLT based to have a CBDC between banks. So one of the main reasons why retail CBDCs are more complex compared to wholesale CBDCs is because they don't already exist and are new in concept. So everything about its development, retail CBDC's development, its distribution, needs to be carefully considered from a policy legislation standpoint to how it fits in with the retail payment ecosystem and with the broader public. So this is the work that needs to be done before developing a retail CBDC, because it doesn't exist to begin with. So it's much more complex. But on the other hand, a wholesale CBDC between banks, it already exists. The concept already exists. A digital euro or a digital bank currency already exists, but it just doesn't exist on DLT technology yet. So the discussions taking place surrounding wholesale CBDCs is not how to introduce them, rather it is how to improve and modernize the payment infrastructure currently used today that operates them. So you can see the discussions are different between a retail CBDC and a wholesale CBDC. A wholesale CBDC just requires the infrastructure that they're built on to be upgraded, because the concept already exists on a different type of technology. And with retail CBDCs, the concept doesn't exist. So it requires a whole different type of investigation into developing it, into distributing it. You have to look at the regulations, the policy, and where it stands with your CBDC fitting in. And you have to look at the retail ecosystem. How is it going to fit into that? And the infrastructure, how is it going to fit into that? And so on. How is the broader public going to receive it? So it's more complex when you're dealing with a retail CBDC compared to a wholesale CBDC. So what it seems at the moment is that the European Central Bank is assessing the potential of DLT and how it could improve their services alongside the potential drawbacks of using DLT. They want to be prepared in case of a scenario where DLT is adopted by the market for wholesale payments so that their CBDC does not lose its role as a settlement asset for wholesale payments, which could happen if their target services is not prepared for DLT adoption. So they want to be prepared for DLT adoption in case the market goes in that direction and the market is implementing DLT based CBDCs, then they want to be able to say, okay, we can do that too, because they don't want to be left behind. So the Euro system is therefore exploring ways in which market participants who adopt distributed ledger technology could interact with the target services to settle the Euro cash leg of their transactions in central bank money still. And that's what they're exploring at the moment. The fastest way, according to the European Central Bank, for them to implement wholesale CBDC infrastructure is by two options. And the first would entail creating a bridge between market DLT platforms and central bank infrastructures. This would allow a securities transfer on a DLT platform to trigger settlement in central bank money. It is very likely that a solution that builds on the existing target services could be implemented more rapidly than a solution based entirely on DLT. Now, this sort of description describes the diagram that I showed in one of my videos, how the XRPL would be in the middle and it would connect different RTGS systems together by interlinking them together. And this is what they're saying here. They could create a bridge between the market DLT platforms, let's assume the DLT platform is the XRPL, and the central bank infrastructure. It is very likely that a solution that builds on the existing services, and this is a solution that will build on what the target system already has, because it will just interlink with them. So by just interlinking with the target system and building on what it already has and connecting it to a DLT system, this sort of system could be implemented more rapidly than a solution based entirely on DLT. Hope that makes sense. And this is what the ECB has been saying for quite a while now, that the holy grail of cross-border payments could be a solution that interlinks different RTGS systems together. And it has an integrated FX layer and an integrated CBDC interoperability layer. And this sort of describes that solution, which could be an option as to the way they go. Another option would be to create a new DLT-based wholesale settlement service with DLT-based central bank money. The Euro system could, for instance, launch its own DLT platform for settlement in central bank money. Alternatively, we could make central bank money available on DLT platforms operated by market stakeholders, allowing both cash and assets to be transferred there. Now, the second option would take longer to implement because they would have to build a DLT-based wholesale settlement service, and then they would have to build a DLT-based central bank money. And it's basically more of changing the infrastructure rather than keeping what they have and just having an interlinking system. So they would have to build out their own platform for settlement in central bank money, basically. And even if you go through an option like this, it doesn't mean if they build out their own DLT system, they can't benefit from XRPL, because there's so many ways now that you can have blockchains connecting to each other, being interoperable with one another, and interlinking with each other through different types of bridges and so on. So we could still benefit from the XRPL ledger, but it just means that it's longer for them, it's more difficult for them because they're going to have to build out a DLT platform compared to just having an interlinking system that already connects with the infrastructure that they have already. So these are the two options that they're analyzing and they're considering, and they're seeing what's basically best for them at the moment. So what is the status of the digital euro wholesale CBDC? So from the information that they have released so far, it seems like they are considering and exploring a DLT-based wholesale digital euro CBDC. And it looks like they may be more inclined toward an interlinking system that can build on or connect to the already existing interbank settlement infrastructure that they have, instead of creating an entire whole new DLT-based settlement system themselves for settlement of wholesale digital euro. So they seem to be more inclined with the interlinking system than having to build it all out themselves. They basically say a DLT-based system that can interlink with their already existing infrastructure can be implemented more rapidly than building a new one solely based on DLT. Now, as I've said, I've already touched on this in a few of my videos now, how the ECB refers to an interlinking system that has an FX and CBDC interoperability layer integrated, and they consider it to be the holy grail of cross-border payments. If you watch my holy grail cross-border payments video, I go through that. And also in part 3 of my XRP and November utility series, I showed a diagram of how this can potentially work in the future, with the XRPL interlinking all the domestic central bank RTGS systems together worldwide to process and settle their CBDCs in a DLT environment. And like they say, that is the easiest rollout solution for them. It seems like at the moment they are just saying if the market wants it, then they would have a DLT wholesale CBDC settlement system ready. That's what their stance is. Like if the market demands it, then we would have it. So if they're talking like that, then they already plan to build it and have one. So the status of the digital euro wholesale CBDC, it seems like the status of that CBDC, a wholesale CBDC for interbank payments, is being considered and evaluated by the ECBC still. They're still considering it and evaluating it. However, in regards to the retail digital euro, that is in the works, and they plan to have legislation for it in 2023. But it would be much easier to implement a wholesale CBDC than a retail CBDC. So from the timelines, if they say a retail CBDC could take up until 2026, a wholesale CBDC could be introduced much sooner and much quicker, because they are already using a CBDC for interbank payments, but they are just not using a DLT system. So all they would have to do is figure out how they're going to implement a DLT system, and pretty much that's it. They could have a CBDC ready. So if they were to launch a wholesale CBDC built on DLT, there would be no regulatory hurdles, as the concept of digital money between banks already exists. It would simply be just a change in the infrastructure. And that's something important to understand as well, because the retail side of having a CBDC, there is regulatory hurdles. Whereas the wholesale side of a CBDC, because the concept exists, if they were to make one, there would be no regulatory hurdles, because it's not about introducing a CBDC, it's just about the infrastructure that's going to be used, changing that infrastructure, improving it, and so on. The Central Bank of France has already been developing a wholesale CBDC. So although the ECB, the European Central Bank, is responsible for creating CBDCs, other countries in the Eurozone have been contributing to their development. And the Central Bank of France has been at the forefront of developing a wholesale digital euro CBDC. Since 2020, the Bank of France has done about 9 experiments using wholesale CBDCs and is planning to do another 3 more. 2 will focus on cross-border payments, including CBDC interoperability and liquidity management tools that use DeFi. So the Central Bank of France, while the ECB is saying we don't know whether we're going to do it yet or not, the Central Bank of France has already been developing a wholesale digital euro. And they've been working on it, and they've been contributing to that development. And for the past 2 years, they've already been experimenting on it, and they're doing more experiments as well. So which DLT system is likely going to be used for the digital euro? I think it's very likely that Ripple's XRPL may be used in developing the digital euro CBDC, and I would explain why. According to this article, France's central bank is considering Ripple's XRPL as a possible platform for Europe's digital euro. And then we also have the Digital Euro Association, and this association is focused on the development of a digital euro, CBDCs basically, within the Eurozone, and one of their partner members, which are advising them and helping them in the development of that digital euro, is Ripple. So Ripple does have a connection to the Digital Euro Association, which is involved in building a digital euro CBDC, and France is also interested in considering using the XRP Ripple's private ledger XRPL as a possible platform for Europe's digital euro. So Ripple has a private XRPL for central banks to basically build their CBDCs on, and France is interested in building their CBDC on Ripple's XRPL if they haven't done that already. And Ripple is partnered with the Digital Euro Association, and the Digital Euro Association is focused on developing a digital euro. So currently another central bank the Bank of Bhutan has partnered with Ripple to pilot their CBDC as well, using Ripple's private XRP ledger for CBDC development. So it's very likely that the digital euro would be built on the XRPL ledger, and it's likely that Ripple's XRPL is going to be used for the digital euro. From the partnerships that's out there and from the information that we have, they seem to have very close connections. So you could speculate and say Ripple is going to be responsible for building the digital euro CBDC wholesale and retail on their XRPL ledger. So what are the chances now that the digital euro wholesale CBDC would be ready by November? Don't forget to like, subscribe and hit the bell notification icon so as to not miss my next video.